Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the September 16th meeting of the Pownal Planning Commission. We're going to start with a board member roll call.
Jim Winchester.
John Bushy.
Fred Miller,
Stacy Boxer.
Brian Harris.
David Powell.
I'm Nick Zayas.
I'm Smith H. CRC.
First, we gotta approve our agenda, which is gonna be 2 sets of minutes that we have had to table for the past couple of meetings. We have guests from BCRC with a presentation and question and answer session. We're gonna have an update on inviting the Brownells to our next meeting. And we're gonna devise some questions for them. So we'll set our next meeting agenda items. Then we'll go to public comment, then we'll adjourn. So,
Make a motion to approve the agenda as stated.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Approval of minutes for August 19th. Those present in that meeting were me, Jim, Brian, and Stacy.
I move it. We move the motion. I accept.
I'll second.
Okay, he'll stay.
All in favor?
Aye. Abstain. There.
Yeah, I'm abstaining.
Okay, so
Just abstain then. You like that? Made a big deal, jeez.
me, myself, Jim, Stacy, and David.
Move to approve.
Second.
Whatever.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Brian and John, abstain.
Abstain.
Fine if I have to. You like that.
I will be like that. You guys can do it sometime.
So that brings us to our guests and their presentation and question and answer.
So you previously heard from us when we were talking about these maps that are underlying the stuff we're going to talk about tonight. We have since revised and made some edits to those in line with state law, in line with the existing land uses, and in line with harmonization of similar situations across the county. So this is so underlying these areas is the revised future land use map. But the topic of tonight's conversation is whether this committee would support the town seeking a what's called Tier 1B exemption from Act 250. And we have a summary of what that is and what your responsibilities would be.
It's okay.
On these sheets that are circulated around the table. The biggest thing is that if you opt into this, and it is an opt-in situation, that also requires consent of the select board, you will then be exempt from Act 250 for projects that are up to 50 units and under 10 acres of land for housing and mixed-use developments. And that will follow that will apply to the designated areas that are approximately what is in the maps that I've shown. If you want to see the detail of this, that is this map with a 3. We have mapped the maximum extent of the potential Tier 1B areas. Importantly, you as a planning commission can give us guidance on what, if anything, we should bring to the select board. And your choice, and the choice that is about that should be considered here, is that you can choose to apply it to any one center and all of either the dark pink village center or the light pink village area, but it needs to be all of that area for a given center. So if you want to say only Tier 1B only in North Pownal and only in the center, but both the center and the village area in Pownal Center, for instance. That is just random, but what the general sense is that that municipalities are going in a couple of different directions. Some have areas that have capacity for development they really want to focus on, or they have like a historic center that doesn't have much development capacity, say North Shaftesbury would be a good example of that. That's just a historic center, probably wouldn't be a center map today. So they don't want to apply tier 1B to that, but they are really passionate about bringing a tier 1B status to, say, South Shaftesbury, where there are some interesting projects they want to do. So we're working from a default of here's the maximum extent that you can do, and then we can work backwards to either none or some. But the key is this is about Act 250 exemptions, where relieving regulatory burden on housing focused projects that are already in areas that have public utilities. These areas that are mapped are defined primarily and in Pownal almost entirely by areas that have water, sewer, or both. It only has to be one of them, and you can also have areas that have good septic soils but no water or sewer. That's not particularly relevant to Pownal at all. All the areas that are relevant here are on water or sewer. So what we're seeking some guidance on is, what's your sense of this? Do you think the idea of a lower regulatory burden on housing projects in your centers is something you want? A lot of people like to complain about 250, but a lot of people love 250.
What are the cons of this?
So there isn't much con. It is the town taking on some responsibility. It is not having you do 250. It's requiring a little bit more. There's less buck passing that this committee and your associated committee can do to say, this is a project that's a little bit larger than we may have typically dealt with, but it's something that we can handle within our zoning laws. And we don't need an extra regional layer for some of these projects that typically would go to the 250 commission. Something, say 10 units or we'll say 12 units. Something that's 12 units would sit with your jurisdiction and not have to go up for regional review with all of the added costs that come with regional review. It's a lot of regulatory burden to get something through 250 because the criteria that you work on or that are regulated by Act 250 are much broader than the criteria that your zoning bylaw would handle. The other piece that you're committing to is that you have the administrative capacity to do that. A town, say the size of Stamford, may not be able to have the administrative capacity to engage in this kind of regulation, or a town, say that maybe the size so it wouldn't be compatible with that. But your town has plenty of administrative capacity, in as much as this is not a lot more ask of your government, but there is some ask of your government. There are more projects that would be in your jurisdiction that would be handled by those at the regional jurisdiction, which for us is basically Bennington County. So that's the summary. I definitely skipped over some things. That's a very quick and dirty summary, but I don't want to bore you with a whole bunch of details about the hows and the whys here. So
Looks like it's just. The water situation is very bad right now. And the only place we have any water is down District 5, water supply. Potable water here in the North Pownal.
Well, he said you could have water or sewer, you don't have to have both.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. The municipal water situation is entirely optional. The sewer constraint is typically a lot worse in most municipalities. So the fact that you guys have sewer, it may be something but the water situation is something you still want to take into consideration. And it may be that I think it's District 2 up here, or is it District 3 up in this general vicinity?
Mhm.
One of those districts that is a really small base that really struggles with capacity, and a 10-unit project on whatever the smaller of the two systems is, and I cannot remember which one is which. May be something that you want to consider not including, but because you have the wastewater, it does give you a lot of leeway to do that, and knowing that the project still needs water permits for it to actually be successful. It's just making it so the water permit is the constraint, not a zoning land use regulatory burden.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess to add to that, like your zoning is still in place, like a lot of other regulations are still in effect. It's really just about removing the Act 250 process that some of these larger projects would have to go through. So it's not like writing a blank check. There's still a lot of those processes in place.
Yeah, I see it says that our local zoning regulations would have to match or exceed those of the existing 250 regulations. Am I correct on that?
Yes, and because you already have a confirmed zoning, your zoning has been reviewed already. As we understand it, it's not something that you guys would really need to move to change your bylaws to participate in. That is something that we have not run into in other municipalities in the area, in as much as because your zoning is already reviewed for compliance with state law as part of our review process.
Okay,
You're generally safe on that.
okay, hypothetically, say we go through this.
Yeah.
What if a conflict arises between the state regulations and what Vermont or what Pownal has on their zoning bylaws?
It would really depend on the nature of it. Typically, in these situations, the tighter of the regulations rules. That is the general standard of if there are if there's a state and a local thing, but if the local is more binding or more limiting, then that will rule. But if the state rules tighter than yours, yes.
Okay, but if the state's not reviewing it, or is the state still going to review any permitting issued locally?
So these are still subject to appeal. So if someone feels that you're not in compliance or feels like a project was wrongly denied or something like that by the locality, all of the standard appeals process remains in place, and knowing that that's going to be revised too in the coming year or two. But yeah, the appeals process is the check on the towns going wild with this and using it to permit things they really shouldn't be.
So reducing the burden of review at the state level sounds like a great idea in limited areas. I guess what I'm trying to play devil's advocate on is what happens. We have some zoning people, maybe there's some changes, maybe somebody drops the ball, doesn't do it right. Is there exposure for our town staff or committees or whatever in those kinds of situations that would be a problem?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. As we understand it, it's no more than you would with any normal zoning decision. That any zoning decision is subject to appeal functionally, and this would just be another thing that would be subject to appeal. And
Is there any type of punishment structure handed out by the state if, say, a local board passes something that they shouldn't have, one way or the other?
it has not been defined. It's something that we will probably only learn what reaction the legislature has taken after this regime has been in place for a couple of years. Importantly, this is something that once you're opting in, you're not having to renew. So it is opt in, and then if the state sees that some municipalities are going off the rails, they'll pass new laws to change it. But as part of Act 181, which set the system up, there is not a punishment process for the municipalities if they're doing anything wrong. Like knowing that they have a bunch of other checks to make sure that the things that are really harmful environmental issues are already regulated by someone else and are already being checked off by, say, A&R or wastewater permits and what like that.
What if some good faith would hold if we could make an honest mistake and then we fix?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's honestly what I was looking at here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's there are going to be towns smaller than you who are opting into 1B. And ultimately, most of these decisions are going to be really boilerplate. It's going to be, say, a project that is, say, 10 or 8 homes on 6 acres would be something that currently today is subject to 250 because it's more than 6 homes. So most of the projects that you're dealing with are going to be relatively digestible in scale, that are not going to have those kind of scary impacts that would raise the fear of the state wanting to get to be elicit a punishment in some form, wanting to feel like you've been negligent. No one is going to think that you guys are negligent for interpreting your zoning in the way that is in line with state law. That has been reviewed by people whose job it is to review them. So.
Okay, so for the tier 1A for the fully exempt, and then over in tier 1B, it says 50 units or fewer on 10 acres
Yep.
or less for housing and mixed use development.
Yep.
I guess I'm just looking for some clarification on that, because the maps you provided
Yep.
don't have a key and the individual colors are not
Yep.
labeled.
Yep. And so the biggest thing is so one, we can set aside tier 1A. That's something that no one in Bennington County, I think, is going to be applying for. We're talking only about tier 1B with this 50 units, 10 acres thing. So the areas that we're talking about are the hashed like areas that are over the 2 pink colors.
Well, I guess what I'm looking for is a more detailed map so we can better
Yeah.
see what.
Yeah, let me throw the map up in more detail on the screen. Sorry. Sure. Oh, I had it. Okay. So there we go. So you want to just pick one of the centers and we can.
Can you make that bigger?
Yeah, I'll.
Let's start right here in Pownal South.
Okay, so we'll zoom right into the general location that we're at. And I will see if I can make this full screen. Kate, could you just close the participants box for a minute? That should help, but okay.
I guess it can't go further, yeah.
Okay, so
Sorry.
yeah, so each of these centers has generally been expanded to be as comprehensive as it can be as part of the FLU process. But yeah, we have this mapped. So the village center is this magenta color underlying the hash that I'm pointing to, and the village area, which is the residential neighborhood surrounding the downtowns, is this pink color. So we've done the maximum extent of this we can through the FLU process, trim these back. And we expect that the borders will be adjusted because some of the areas that are on the water system and not on the wastewater system are going to need to be refined to be for the eligibility areas. So that's my caveat. But yeah, we're talking about primarily these relatively medium-sized projects in these magenta and pink areas.
So the magenta and pink area is going to be the expanded area?
This is these would be the exemption areas.
Oh, okay.
We can choose.
Yeah, and it can be either or both, and then that for each of the centers.
Okay.
So,
because we've been discussing as part of our town plan changes about changing like rural residential like designations, trying to expand them out to more include businesses and trying to expand it north, maybe reaching further down south as far as like Pownal View Barn, like that. So I was just curious, like,
this runs down to the Pownal View Barn. That's the last.
Okay, I thought that. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it cut off before that.
Yeah, no. So but this is also an area because there's only water in here. We may have to bring this back to like closer to the edge of the center.
Okay.
This is Burrington, so
Pownal
View is all the way down. That's right there.
Yeah, Pownal View Barn's right there.
So Pownal View is right at
it is the last property.
But like you just said, because there's no sewer down that way, they might have to trim it
Yeah,
back.
we may have to trim it back. It's
So really the sewer is more of the requirement. You say
primarily,
but primarily like you definitely need the sewer
or suitable soils, but yeah, it's one of
But
those.
then you said suitable soils really doesn't apply.
Suitable soils doesn't apply nearly as much. There may be a couple of properties on the edges here that does apply to. But yeah, all of this is subject to if a property is served by sewer, we want to include it.
Okay,
If the property is served by water, we want to include it. And if it's
but this is only for, these exemptions are only for residential use.
residential or mixed use, so it could be a like live work situation as well. But not primary commercial. State law with this FLU stuff is it's meant to capture your commercial in the centers or.
What about hypothetically?
Yeah.
Angie? Say a 2-unit apartment building with a small laundromat on the first floor.
Probably would be exempt. It would certainly already be exempt because that project wouldn't rise to the 250 level. Let's say a 7-unit apartment building.
Okay.
With a laundromat on the bottom, that would be exempt. So that would be down to you guys for review.
Okay,
And you'd say, well, one.
and that's where the sewer and water usage would come in to make sure that the system can handle it.
Yeah, that's where you want to talk about that. You want to talk about all the other, constraints about a laundromat that you want to think about, and the rest of your local zoning, which all would still apply. And so that would be a really good example of why they have